Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I've got my wrap up for Old School April. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, Old School April. What a fantastic event. I didn't know how much I needed this until I was doing it. Yes, this was an epic nostalgia themed readathon and watchathon for the entire month of April. And it was a team event, so whatever you read and watched, you submitted on a very well made form online to get points for the team that you had decided to join. There were 3 teams. Yes, there was lots of 80s, 90s, early 2000s, excuse me, reading and watching. For me, plenty of horror. Yeah, it was an absolutely cracker of an event. It was so fun. And it really just helped me kind of get into my reading massively this month. So a massive thanks to Kelsi from Slime and Slashes for organising it, and all the amazing co-hosts that were doing various things all the way through, gave us some cracking recommendations for things. Yeah, thank you ever so much to everybody, because it was, as I say, such a fun event. So, what did I read and what did I watch? I will do the books first, and then I will move on to the watchathon. First book was for the first prompt, which was, the prompt was, read any Goosebumps book, or read a book that fits the theme or the vibe of an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I picked a comic book, which was within the kind of the theme or vibe of an episode called The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner, which is about comic books, apparently. This is one that Kelsi recommended, because I don't watch Goosebumps, I don't read Goosebumps or anything like that. And I picked LumberJanes, Volume 1, Beware the Kitten Holy, which is by Shannon Waters, Grace Ellis, Gus Allen, and N.D. Stevenson. And this follows the story of a group of 5 teenage girls who are attending a scout camp for the summer, and all the strange supernatural occurrences that they come across there, and they have to work together to kind of solve the mysteries of these strange things happening, and battle to protect their camp and their friends. This was brilliant. This is a 5 out of 5 for me. It's a very fun, very silly story, but it's got some absolutely cracking characters in it. The group of girls themselves, they're all really different. There's diversity in pretty much every way. And the humour can be very silly, but it can also be very dry, quite sarcastic humour, which I definitely appreciate both forms of humour on that. The art style is not something that I would necessarily have gone for if I'd just been looking at this kind of in a comic book shop, kind of looking on spec, because it's a very loose style, almost scribbly in parts, which isn't the sort of thing I'd usually look for. But it's once I kind of got into it, it was fantastic. It's really colourful. It's got an absolute ton of energy. The sort of the feeling of kind of motion, movement, etc. The the pace is really heightened by the artwork, and it's got lots of detail as well, despite it being quite loose and in some parts kind of almost looks like it's drawn quickly, but I doubt it is. It's got a lot of detail that's not only in kind of the sort of character work, but just generally across the panels. It's got a lot of kind of detail in the background and away from the focus of the panel, away from the foreground. which really adds to kind of the character presentation and the character development, and the environment as well. It's really nice art style. I really like the format as well of this. There's a little sort of, in each issue there's an opening kind of excerpt from like a fictional LumberJanes field manual, with a bit about kind of a badge, like a scout badge type thing, that sort of alludes to the themes of the coming issue. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I will definitely be reading more of this. It was a quick read, and it was just nothing but fun, really. But it had heart to it, had a lot of heart to it. There's some great representation in there, as to say, like the characters are diverse. There's some great queer representation, and all the characters have got their flaws, but they're all very different personality-wise, but they're really endearing. So yeah, there's more volumes of it on Kindle Unlimited, so I will definitely dig into that again soon. So that was a good first one to start with. Okay, then I went on to prompt number 2, which was any horror book published in the 1980s. And so for this, I read The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker, which I think is 1986. This follows the story of a mysterious puzzle box, a Le Marchand's configuration, I think it's called, or Le Marchand's box, which opens up a portal to another world, another worldly realm, inhabited by the Cenobites, a sort of group of sadomasochistic beings. So yes, this one, very different from my first read. I've read some Barker before. I've read some Books of Blood, but I'd never read The Hellbound Heart, knowing that it was the inspiration for Hellraiser, and being terrified of even the video box art of that as a kid. I'd kind of put it off, but I'm really glad I did read it. This one is a 4 out of 5 for me. Great stuff. Yeah, really good, short and sweet. Well, not sweet, but short read, but very compelling read. I really like Barker's writing style anyway. He conjures up some fantastic, horrific imagery. It's visceral. It's quite gross in parts. It speaks to themes of pleasure, pain, vanity, arrogance, love as well. But yeah, it's the things that we do for love. But it's typical Barker. I think it's that visceral, bonkers stuff. You can't help but get a clear picture of in terms of a visual image in your head when certainly for me when I read Barker. So yeah, really enjoyed this one, and I will read. It's kind of I haven't read Barker for years, and this one will probably get me back into reading Barker again and try and read some of his other stuff. Read some more Books of Blood, and then some of his bigger works like Weave World. So that was my second one. Prompt number 3 then. This is another ebook, and this was Read an Animal Attack Book was the prompt, and this one I switched my choice. Originally I was going to do Killer by Peter Tonkin, but by the time I came to kind of read this, I'd kind of blown my budget for books for April, and so I will save that for Garb August. So instead I switched to Slither by John Holkin. I just thought I'd have a look through the paperbacks from Hell book that I have by Grady Hendrix and have a little search and see what I could get on Kindle Unlimited from stuff in there. And I found Slither and 2 others by John Holkin as well. So yeah, Slither is a book about killer worms, slow worm type worms rather than earthworm type worms. So more kind of snaky, I guess, than you know, your typical what you'd think of as a worm. And it follows a cameraman, a TV cameraman, Matt Parker, who is the first victim of a worm attack, sustained when he is filming in the sewers of London. And he's attacked badly. And there's a couple of other minor attacks, but it kind of dies down. The press dies down with the story, and nobody's really paying any attention. And Matt tries to get his TV bosses to see the seriousness of the situation, which they don't. But he also becomes kind of somewhat obsessed with the worms as well, much to the anger of his wife, and it puts strains on his marriage. So yeah, as the story progresses, the worms become larger, should we say, and more aggressive, and the attacks become more vicious and more disgusting, and it all ends in a showdown between Matt and some rather monstrous sized worms. This was a 4 out of 5 for me. This was really good fun. I really enjoyed this. It was, you know, silly enough, but gross enough, you know, with just enough tension to you know, and it's set in, you know, in Britain, so it kind of had a very British feel about it, little villages and stuff like that. You know, it kind of felt familiar, and it felt kind of familiar even though it was written, you know, kind of 40 years ago, over 40 years ago now. It didn't feel that dated to me. There's some stuff, some attitudes, things like that, some tech, you know, things like cameras and stuff like that, but because you're not getting into detail with it, it doesn't feel really dated. It you know, it felt current enough. I particularly like the quote in the front of it as well, which is a quote from Antony and Cleopatra that Hawkins included, which is just, "The worm is not to be trusted. There is no goodness in the worm." I kind of read that before I started, and I thought, okay. He's quoting Antony and Cleopatra. This guy's probably got a sense of humour. Not read any Hawking before. And so, yeah, this one, as I say, this one was just really good fun, really silly, gross enough. And I just like this. I really like the setup of it. You know, it's something that not could happen, but you know, it was believable enough within the context of the story. There are a couple of other John Halkins on Kindle Unlimited. I think there's Slime and something. There's another one as well. There's one about killer moths and one about killer jellyfish, I think, something like that. So I'm definitely going to save those and have a go at those for Garb August, because I really enjoyed this one. Okay, prompt number 4. Nostalgic tech, this one was. Read a book featuring older tech on the cover or in the story, and the publishing year doesn't matter. So I went with one of Kelsi's recommendations on this of what fitted, and that is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca, which I already owned. Just read the first story, the title story in this. Because this is about a relationship between two women who meet via email and then converse within chat rooms in the early 2000s. So there's your old tech, basically, or older tech. And although chat rooms and things like that are still a thing, and obviously emails are, chat rooms, you know, were certainly a massive deal in the early 2000s. So yeah, this is psychological horror, and it's told entirely through emails and kind of chat logs from the chat rooms, and it follows the women, two women connecting, following an initial correspondence over an antique apple peeler, randomly, which one of them is selling, and their conversations become kind of more and more disturbing, and their relationship steps into very dangerous territory, and becomes, you know, kind of darker and darker. This one was tough for me. This one was a tough read. I've given it a 4.5 out of 5. I can't quite give it 5, but it's outstanding, I think, for what it is. It's just, I don't know whether, I'm still processing it, to be honest. I still don't entirely know how I feel about it. It may get bumped up to a 5 in the future. It may get lowered to a 4. But however I turn out on it, however I kind of, end up feeling about it when I've kind of maybe read some more of LaRocca's work and kind of situated it within his kind of body of work, it's the writing is incredibly evocative, atmospheric. It's got a really strong focus on character. It's got a really interesting and, kind of, I think, really well pitched pacing. It starts really funny. It's very, it's dry humour. And it descends to start with slowly, but then it kind of almost flips and it descends into darkness much quicker. And then it kind of just keeps going. You kind of think, for me, I kind of thought, oh, right, okay, this is where we're going with this. And then it just keeps going and it just keeps going. And, it was one of those where, I have quite a strong stomach when it comes to horror, but elements of this made me feel physically nauseous. It was, I had a physical reaction to it, most definitely. And it's just, I think it's a really, really interesting look at the ideas of control within a relationship, and certainly I don't want to give too much away about it if you haven't read it, but something that you think you want, but actually when you get it, it's too much for you. I think that's kind of the easiest and most kind of subtle way I can put it in terms of what I found interesting about it. I'm going to have to read it again, I think, and go back over it with kind of a bit more of a fine-tooth comb. But it's difficult. There is some animal abuse in it, which I always find extremely difficult to read. That's kind of my nemesis with horror. There's just, it's just one of those that just kind of creeps me out a bit. Well, a lot. I'm definitely need to read some more about LaRocca's writing. In fact, I've got some more on my my May hope to read list. But this one, I'm going to probably talk about this collection once I've finished it, I think, because there's more discussion for this, definitely, in my head anyway, but I need to process it first. So that was my one for the nostalgic tech prompt. Right, next up was a mood read, 2003 or earlier, or set in 2003 or earlier, or a retro vibe. I put down on my kind of hope to read some sort of a comic. I'd thought of maybe Hellblazer or Preacher, and then I was looking through my my kind of comics wish list, if you like, on Kindle Unlimited, and noticed that I'd got some manga on there, and I've been reading a bit of manga recently, and I'm really liking it. So I decided to go for this instead, because this was originally published, I think, in 1990, I believe, and this is Parasyte, Volume 1 by Hitoshi Iwaki. And this is the story of Shinichi Izumi, who's a high school student who is infected by an alien parasite, and the alien parasite takes over his right hand. He manages to stop it from getting into his brain, and so it can't take over his brain. So it takes over his right hand instead, and he struggles to, kind of come to terms with this new reality that he now has this thing that talks, that kind of transforms his hand into various different things. And yeah, he struggles to kind of deal with this relationship with this parasite, which is called Migi, which means right in Japanese apparently. And he also discovers that other parasites have started to take over other people and are feeding on other humans. So along with Migi, he has to protect his family, his friends, and try and rid the world of the parasitic threat. Yeah, this this one was bonkers, which I kind of expected. This one is a 4 out of 5 for me. This is great stuff, and I will read more of this. There are some more volumes on Kindle Unlimited, so I will dive back into volume 2 very soon, I should think. Yeah, it's bonkers, but it's hilariously good fun. I love the art style. I love some of the shading that is used in it. I love the design of Migi, and some of the other sort of parasitic monsters, and kind of the way they transform humans. It's quite gross in parts, and it's got a little bit of a kind of, it's got elements of a sort of puerile sense of humour, which is up my street sometimes, but it's also just sarcastic and silly, and yeah, just bonkers. It's bonkers. And yeah, it was a really surprising and just fun read, this one. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, as I say, I will go back and read some more of that. But if you haven't read Parasyte, I do recommend it if you like some silly, gross manga. But it does it explores kind of ideas of free will and identity, and sort of relationships between people and environment and things like that. So it has got more than just silly, bonkers, gross fun, and I appreciate it for that. It's as I say, it was a surprise one. That one that I liked it as much as I did. So check that one out. Next up was prompt number 6, which was Fear Street, read a Fear Street or Point Horror or Christopher Pike book. And I picked a point horror, which was Teacher's Pet by Richie Tankersley-Cusick. And this one is a story of a student called Kate, who goes away to a week-long writing conference with her teacher. And she's fascinated by horror. She loves to be scared, etc. But the teacher that she's kind of desperate to be taught by there has gone missing, and instead it's his brother teaching the class, and she becomes a bit infatuated with him, and he is I think quite infatuated with her, and yet someone starts to threaten her and her friends, and things turn dark. So yeah, this one is it's a teen horror, essentially young adult horror novel. I first read this when I was about 12 or 13, so we're talking early 90s. I never read it since, so this was really fun to go back and reread something from my childhood, from my young teenage years. Yeah, this was decent. This was a 3 out of 5 for me. It feels maybe a little bit dated in some respects, which, well, yeah, from the 90s. But it's still fun. I think it kind of lacked a little bit of like pacing. The pacing was off slightly at times, but not to the point of like making it boring or anything like that. I mean, it's not that long anyway. It's like 214 pages, and it's an easy read. So you can rip through it, and it's got some good tense bits in it, and it's got some mystery to it. I didn't remember what happened, from when I'd read it before, so it was kind of like it was all new to me. I remembered like snapshots of it as I came to it, but I couldn't remember what had happened at the end. But yeah, so it kind of it keeps its mystery, keeps you guessing. It's got some good little set pieces in it. It's got a good sense of kind of dread, sense of threat to it. So yeah, it's a good fun read, and I remember that from, you know, I remember it being fun when I read it as a teenager. I read quite a few point horrors. So yeah, it still stands up. It's still a good fun book. So I enjoyed that little bit of nostalgia and that little trip back in time with that one. Okay, prompt number 7, which was Teen Witch, which was anything magical elements, wizards, etc. I didn't get to my planned read for this, unfortunately, which was A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This was one of the ones I didn't get time to do. But I did manage to get get points for this from one of my other books, because you could mix and match points, which was very fair. So I will come to that book in a moment. And likewise, I didn't do anything different for the horror set or published in the 90s. Instead, that one also was taken up by Parasyte, Volume 1. That was originally going to be a Stephen King, Rose Madder, but I'm having a little bit of a block for Stephen King at the moment, and I don't know why, but I just didn't fancy reading it when it came round to read that one, so I thought, I'm not going to force myself. This thing's all about enjoyment. So I decided to leave that, and I will come back to that at another stage. So yeah, so that was also taken, the points for that. It came from Parasyte. So, number 9, prompt was Buffy, a storybook with a female protagonist or written by a woman. And that was Buffy. Buffy the Vampire Slayer comic, volume 2, because I already read volume 1, which is called Once Bitten. And these are the comics by Geordie Belair. And I had this as a digital. And this is it's a continuation of, you know, Buffy's adventures, essentially. And this one largely focuses on the fact that Xander has been bitten by Drusilla and Spike, and turned, or nearly turned. And how did they save him? He's kind of in this kind of in-between limbo state before he fully turns into a vampire, and Willow and Buffy and Giles and Jenny Calendar all have to work together to try and save him. So yeah, this one is it's more of the same, really. I think I enjoyed the first volume far more. This one's a 3 out of 5 for me. It's decent and I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good as the first volume for me. I do like the art style. It's wonderfully colourful, and it's it's the characters are well rendered. You know, the kind of, they are quite clearly based on the characters from the TV series, but there's enough difference. There's enough of a sort of a slight shift to A, update, and B, just kind of make it not like somebody's just trying to, you know, one for one draw that person. There is enough of a slight difference. I think it was, as I say, it wasn't bad. It just didn't give me the excitement, I think, as much as the first volume of the comics. I will keep going with them and read the next one, because I love Buffy and I can't not, basically. So yeah, but yeah, slightly disappointed with that one, I have to say. Okay, then we've got Readathon prompt 10, which was a bonus or replacement prompt, which was read a book with neon on the cover, and I picked In the Shadow of Extinction by Kelly Warner. And I decided to read, I have the omnibus edition, which is books 1 to 3, but I just read book 1, because, the whole omnibus is like 700 and something pages, I think, so I didn't have time for all of that, but I just read the first book, which was also part of my reading for Trans Girl April as well. So yeah, the first book is The Ring of Fire, and we follow a number of characters present at the beginning of the end of the world as we know it, basically. Earthquakes happen and volcanoes erupt and destroy kind of cities and huge areas of the planet. And then monstrous creatures appear, some out of volcanoes and out of like the Yellowstone caldera, which is erupted. And yeah, they appear out of volcanoes or out of the sea. In the case of one particularly horrible species of kaiju, called which have been nicknamed by the humans as breeders, because that's basically what they do. When they die, they drop eggs, and lots of eggs, and they just multiply, and they kind of live in water. And they managed to come ashore because there's been tidal waves and cities are underwater and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, all of these various kaiju monsters appear and, you know, exert their dominance essentially on the new world that is forming. So it's survival and monsters. This is a 4 out of 5 for me. This is great stuff. I really enjoyed this. This was, again, really good fun. Yeah, the monsters are well described, well realised. I think there's like three different sorts in book 1, and the breeders seem to take like that. They're taking kind of the most of the focus in this one, with the kind of like weird crab type things, but not like crabs. They're not like crabs. But in terms of the fact that they kind of come out of they come out of the water, and I think they've got 6 legs. But yeah, they're odd, and they can be like as small as like a cat, or like as like big as like 60-70 foot high, and yeah, there's just tons of them. And yeah, they're pretty gross in terms of the way that they kill people. And yeah, we kind of get sort of taken around the world to various places to kind of see different people's perspectives on what's happening as it happened. And some people survive and some people don't. But yeah, it's a really... Kelly Warner's style is very straightforward. It's like, it's not at all purple prose, and I really appreciate that, because it's a very accessible read, especially like because I don't know much about kind of the kaiju kind of cultural tradition and stuff like that. But this is, yeah, it's just a really accessible read, and even though it's very kind of straightforward in its style, it doesn't. That doesn't take away from its impact. She does a really good job of being able to describe the environment, the creatures, the people, etc. I think it's probably, you know, it's more plot driven, I would say, although the character development is there, but it's, you know, it's about the monsters and the monsters attacking and the deaths and the survival and stuff, but there is good character development there as well. Yeah, just all round, it was a really entertaining read, and one that I definitely want to keep going with. I'll go back and read the books 2 and 3 in that compendium, because I want to see what happens next, because at the moment the monsters are kind of winning. So yeah, really good one, that one. I would thoroughly recommend that if you haven't come across it before. And the final book, which was actually a bonus prompt, part of the bonus section of the Readathon, Watchaton, Epicathon, was a recommendation from Kelly Hooked on Books, and that was Rosemary's Baby, which I can't believe I'd never read, frankly. And you know, I think this one's pretty well known. If you haven't read the book, you might have seen the film. The Polanski film, which I haven't seen yet. But this follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her husband, Guy, who's an actor, who move into a prestigious New York City apartment building in search of a perfect life for themselves as a young aspiring couple in the late 1960s in America, and Rosemary becomes increasingly suspicious of her neighbours, the Cassavetes, an older couple, Minnie and Roman, and kind of them insinuating themselves into her life, and she becomes increasingly suspicious of why they're doing this. And I won't spoil anything more in case you haven't read it or seen it or aren't aware of the story, because it's fantastic. This one is a 5 out of 5 without a doubt. This one, as I say, I can't believe I'd not read it before. I can't believe I'd left it for so long. I don't know why. I must have just, when I was younger, looked at it and kind of gone, yeah, no, I don't think I'd fancy that. How wrong I was. Maybe I just needed to be older to appreciate it. But yeah, this was absolutely brilliant. It was a quick read. I think I read it in about 4.5, 5 hours in one sitting, pretty much in one sitting. With a little break to take the dog out for his bedtime ablution. Mainly because I couldn't put it down. The writing in this is just brilliant. The pacing is absolutely brilliant. The plotting structure of it is excellent. The characters are really well realised and developed. It feels real. It feels really real. I think that's how I'd say it, is like the descriptions of the apartment and the characters and the events, but particularly the kind of the setting elements of it are so evocative. I could just picture it immediately. It was one of those that I had such a clear image in my head of it. And I've never seen the film, so that's a good thing, because I'm not pulling from the film version. I think I've had it was on in the background. I might have watched part of it in the background back when I was at university, and therefore probably a little sourced. So I don't remember it. I remember some of the kind of the iconic images of, say, Rosemary, Mia Farrow, I think, isn't it? Just from pop culture things where you've seen them pop up, but I don't have any memory of kind of the apartment or anything like that. And so that was really good for me, because Levin's writing just enabled me to really just build this really vibrant picture of the setting and of the character descriptions. And yeah, it was one of those books where as soon as I started reading it, I was in it, and I didn't want to break off. Really, I wanted to remain in it and finish it in one go. It felt right to do it that way. I will definitely read it again. Absolutely, I need to read it again. I think I'll get more out of it a second time when I can read it a little bit slower. And I've just bought 2 more I-11s the other day in a discount bookshop. So I got The Stepford Wives and The Boys from Brazil to read, because I really, really want to read some more of his stuff now. Absolutely brilliant. I think possibly my favourite book from Old School April. So those are all the books that I read. So I got through quite a few. I'm quite pleased with how many I got through. So onto the Watchathon then. I will whip through these reasonably quickly. So the first one, which was for a prompt, which was watch an 80s horror movie. I watched The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. I'd never seen this before. This was one that I'd been too scared to watch as a youngster, and I'd never got around to watching. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. The suspense level was just right. The tension level was just right for me. The practical special effects were brilliant. Some really well done gross effects, but also some stuff that these days it's kind of a little bit funny as well. And just a really good kind of exploration of sort of paranoia and the breakdown of trust amongst a group, as they all try to kind of figure out which one amongst them is this, has been turned into this alien. And kind of how they try to work together to kind of face face this kind of common threat. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. We'll watch it again, most definitely. And I'm glad I finally got around to watching that. Next one was watch a movie or TV show set in the 80s or 90s or newer adaptation. For this, I watched an episode of Buffy, and that Buffy episode was Hush from season 4 from 1999. So just managed to fit it into the 90s there. My favourite episode of Buffy, without a doubt. The gentlemen still creep me the hell out to this day. But I just, yeah, it's one of those where I love the format of it and the fact that, you know, it is, they can't speak. The characters can't speak. And so everything, you know, that you hear in that is scoring, music, sound effects, etc. And it's just, it's a really tense episode for me. And it's one of the ones that actually still is quite scary, I think, because the gentlemen, as I say, are pretty scary. So yes, that was the second one. Next up was watch an 80s movie. And I let my wife pick this one because we're having a bit of a nostalgia fest ourselves at the moment in terms of films. And she picked Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. I've not seen this in years and years. Probably not since like early 2000s, I should think. And yeah, it's still as fun as it was back then. It's a little dated, as you'd expect for an 80s movie, but not too much so. As I say, we've been watching quite a few 80s and 90s movies recently, and some of them have not aged well. This one I think is still doing all right. This one's still definitely doing all right, and it's, you know, it's a story. It's a story about love and, you know, appreciating things other than money and, you know, treating people right and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's still a great film. Then we'd got watch a 90s horror film. I picked this one, and this one was Scream 2 from 1997. So Wes Craven, and takes place a year after the events of the first one, and Sidney Prescott is now in college. More of the same, really. Not as good as the first one, I don't think. You know, it's still full of, you know, the self-referential humour, horror film conventions, plays on that, all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't remember, I'd seen it before, and I couldn't remember who the killers were in that one. But yeah, just nowhere near as good as the first one. But still very entertaining, still a really enjoyable watch. But the first one I love. But yeah, I need to watch more of the Scream films. I think I've seen the third one, but I don't think I've seen anything after that. So I kind of now need to go on and go through the series and see what I make of the others. Then we've got watch a 90s movie. So any 90s movie, doesn't have to be horror. This one was another one of my wife's picks. And she picked a horror, which surprised me because she's not generally in for the horror. And this one was The Blair Witch Project, which again I had never seen because I was too scared to watch it. It wasn't that bad. We kind of went into it with me kind of going, well, just, you know, at any point, if I need to turn it off, I'm turning it off. Which was an agreement we have. You know, if one of us is like, nope, that there's, you know, no recriminations. If somebody has to go, no, I'm out. But yeah, no, this wasn't bad at all because you don't actually ever see anything. It's, you know, it's tension. It's about, you know, them reacting to, you're reacting to them reacting to things that they're meant to be seeing. But it's really, really effective. I can see why it's such like a huge thing in terms of like horror movies, and why it, you know, it's kind of a milestone sort of, you know, for horror movies and how they're made, and obviously has inspired a ton of found footage things since. But yeah, it works really well. for its simplicity. It's very, very good. It's very effective. And it's the sound as well, rather, because I was thinking, oh, if you don't see anything, if you don't actually see any kind of witch or anything, I'm okay. But actually, it's the sound that's worse. It's the screaming. So yeah, it was really, really enjoyable watch, that one. I'm really glad that I have actually seen that now. Okay, then I watched a host recommendation movie from the bonus prompt section, which was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which was a recommendation from Amy of Amy Noel Reads. Yep, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, one of my favourite films as a kid. I've watched that umpteen times over the years, but I hadn't actually watched it for a fair few years. So it was lovely to go back and watch that again. That was a great Sunday afternoon film. And then the other prompt that I did was watch any movie from the 70s, and this one was Alien. Probably one of my favourite, if not my favourite, horror movie. But just movies, I think this is one of my favourite movies. It's a masterclass in tension for me. I absolutely adore it. I adore the design of it, design of the alien, the design of the ship particularly. I love it. And the characters, as I say, it's the tension, it's the suspense that I just adore. Yeah, a classic. What more can I say, really? It's a classic. So yeah, so I watched that again for I've lost track how many times I've seen Alien. So yeah. So that is it. That is my whole Readathon, Watchathon wrap up for Old School April. I had an absolute blast with this, as I say. I now can't wait for next April to do it again. Thanks again to Kelsi and everybody, all the hosts that put in all the hard work to make this thing such a fantastic time for everybody. And yeah, it's inspired me to read far more horror, far more sort of silly, trashy stuff, and it's pushed me to read some stuff that I wouldn't have necessarily got to, like Parasyte, for instance. I'd totally forgotten that I'd got that on my wish list. And so yeah, it's kind of, and it's just got me into a real kind of reading roll. I'd been in a bit of a reading slump in March, and now I'm on a roll. So we're into horror mayhem and more of this kind of stuff as well with that. So yes, so cracking event. Right, I think that's enough from me on this one. I will be back on Sunday with my wrap up for Trans Girl April, because I read more than just this in April. I had a bit of a mammoth month and got through way more of my massive TBR than I thought I would. So I'll be back on Sunday with the Trans Girl April wrap up. So thank you very much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like and subscribing for more content coming soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.